All right, we got a new Supergirl trailer, and you know what? I think this might be better than the last one, even though I guess I was in the minority in liking that last trailer, but cool. We got a new trailer and it rules. This trailer was definitely more of the narrative trailer that we expect from trailer 2s, and show that this is going to be a very, very accurate adaptation of Tom King's Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, which I think we all assumed was going to be the case, but this, I mean, you watch this trailer and it's like, oh, that's the whole graphic novel aside from the ending. Like, damn, they're trying to get people in. And I get it. There's a lot riding on this film, right? The whole point is to prove that the DCU is more than just Superman, that film wasn't a fluke, and that they can keep making movies that people will show up for. I talked about it quite a bit in that first video I did on the Supergirl trailer, so you should definitely go check that out if you want just like some thoughts and theories and my overall opinions on like the Woman of Tomorrow comic. But for those of you that don't know, Woman of Tomorrow is written by Tom King, and it's an 8-issue series that follows 21-year-old Kara Zor-El and Ruthie hunting down the latter's father's killer, Krem of the Yellow Hills. It explores Kara's trauma of losing Krypton as an adult, her subsequent alcoholism and isolation, and ideological differences with Superman. A lot of the problems with adapting Supergirl is every iteration was kind of existing in the shadow of Superman, whether or not it was just like, oh, this is Lady Superman, or it's like she's Superman but not quite, or whatever. And the whole point of the Woman of Tomorrow comic was to distance her from that and focus on her traumatic past and the kind of person that she is and the things that make her a hero or sometimes an anti-hero, and not just female Superman, which is basically how she's been treated in most every other adaptation, specifically in like the CW show where they just made Kara a female version of Clark, which I mean, that couldn't be further from who that character is if they tried. There's a great quote in issue number 4 that describes King's take on Supergirl. Her power was not one of action, but one of restraint, endurance, and passion. We'll talk about this as we get into like the actual trailer, but I think the whole thing with Supergirl is that she is someone more relatable. She is us, whereas Superman and Clark is like this uber optimistic ideal version of a superhero. It's what we should strive to be, whereas Supergirl is kind of emblematic of who we are a lot of the time. And that's something that clearly resonates with James Gunn, and it's why he's continued to work with Tom King in a creative consulting capacity. A lot of Tom King's best comics take this similar approach, with books like Vision, Mr. Miracle, and Strange Adventures, all deconstructing superheroes and analyzing their emotional conflicts, traumas, and inner demons. Woman of Tomorrow is also told through the perspective of Ruthie, who goes on this journey with Kara, and you get the narration from Ruthie as an adult, reflecting on her teenage quest to get revenge on her family's killer, and how Supergirl both helped and mentored her. And while that doesn't seem to be the case here, now 2 trailers in, I don't think we're going to be getting Ruthie's narration here. It also makes sense to focus the POV on someone like Supergirl and really showcase the human element of that character from her point of view, and then see how that impacts the characters that she's with as she goes on this journey. Because again, as much as the story is about Ruthie and overcoming this intense nihilism and this desire for revenge, it's really about Kara learning to believe in people again, at least in some capacity, and recognizing that caring about something is actually the kind of hope that people need, and it'll inform your actions and inform your heroism. But getting into the actual trailer, I already was on board with this film. I dug that first trailer, but there's no denying that this is an infinitely better trailer than that first one. There's a better sense of narrative, tone, and style, especially tone. I think this perfectly captures the somber tone of the graphic novel. Now, yes, there's going to be some like hijinks and some Lobo shenanigans. We see Jason Momoa going buck wild in here. And sure, yeah, seeing Kara as this sorority girl, like, drunk person, I think will be played for laughs at times. But there's also a tragedy to that persona that seems to really come to the forefront of this trailer. And it's like Kara Zor-El has lived an incredibly tragic life, and this film is going to be unpacking all of that, allowing Kara to connect with people who have endured similar circumstances and who are there for her in a way that someone like Kal-El never could be, because he just doesn't get it. I think that first teaser, while, you know, you could kind of fill in the gaps, and I certainly did if you're familiar with the Woman of Tomorrow graphic novel, it was a bit vague, whereas I think this trailer is definitely, you know, it pretty much maps out the entirety of the Woman of Tomorrow graphic novel, as well as Kara's arc and motivations. There's not a lot of Ruthie, because I think the whole point is to sell people on this new hero, get people excited for Kara Zor-El, and then introduce this incredible character of Ruthie in the film and let people fall in love with her there. But like, you gotta have people believing in the flagship character in order to get them in the door. But that being said, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little nervous that maybe they're sidelining her a bit more than I would like. I mean, especially given the fact that she narrates the book and is our eyes into Supergirl's world. I really hope that they do that character justice, and she isn't just Kara's sidekick, but actually someone who has this intense relationship with Kara and allows us to understand her deeper as a person. Like I said, I don't think they're going to do the narration the way they do in the comic, and I do think this is going to be a POV that's primarily told through the perspective of Kara, and I think that's going to work just fine. But I think what's important about Ruthie, and why I hope this character is like a pretty integral part of the narrative, is because, like I just said, I think there's a way to do all these things, but then have her open up Kara and her worldview and help us understand why she is the way she is. I mean, that's really kind of the heart of Woman of Tomorrow, and allows us to understand Supergirl as a character. One of the biggest criticisms when that first trailer dropped was the aesthetic, the look and feel of it all. Everyone was like, oh, it's just, you know, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 4, and I could not disagree with that more. And I think that's actually a bit reductive of the work Craig Gillespie is doing in this film. While, sure, the two filmmakers share a lot of the same isms per se, they are distinctly their own, and with Craig Gillespie specifically, his filmography features a recurring theme of complex female protagonists. Just look at stuff like Cruella and I, Tonya. While some of the visual language and tone may feel James Gunn-esque, the introspective character stuff feels very Gillespie, especially in this trailer where you see someone who's just completely unraveling. I think that first trailer was a bit more lighthearted, a bit more like, oh, I'm a drunk mess, woohoo, whatever, and like there's a lot of that does feel like Craig Gillespie as well. But this, we start to see the problems that arise as a result of that, the toxic behavior and the darkness inside, and the party antics really just being a way for this character to cope with the cruelty of the world around her. But regardless, I don't think it's fair to say that like, oh, this is just another Guardians of the Galaxy. And visually, in this trailer, they really shut a lot of that down. I'm not going to say this is the most gorgeous film I've ever seen. No, absolutely not. And having just watched Project Hail Mary, yeah, it's going to be kind of hard to top anything that isn't that film. But there's no denying that a lot of the visual effects have been improved, because gasp, they let the artists cook for a little bit. Oh my God. And they put a lot more color correcting work into that, to the point where I really love the contrasts in the visual aesthetics of both this and Superman. Superman leaning more into the blues, the softness of it, the hope and the optimism that color kind of represents, and also the deep melancholy of that character operating within a world that has been dehumanizing him, versus the intense reds in the Supergirl trailer that really highlight the anger and the pain that this character has gone through, and the edge she has, right? Also the idea that she goes and she gets drunk on planets with red suns. I think like all of that makes a lot of sense, and I think having those two colors be prominent in their respective films, like it goes a long way. But more than just the colors, I think overall there's a greater sense of contrast. There's more of a tangibility to everything else going on in there, to the sets, to the action, to the costumes, to like the ship designs, just everything that perhaps the initial teaser suggested for a lot of people. I can't state this enough, but I Really love the tone of this trailer. Gillespie is clearly leaning into the bond between Supergirl and Krypto, which is smart given the latter's popularity in Superman, and using their bond to tell a character study about Kara losing the only real family she has left. Also, how that parallels Ruthie's journey as someone whose family was murdered. Both characters believe they've lost everything and find purpose in each other. It's not, this groundbreaking plot. Again, Woman of Tomorrow was inspired by stuff like True Grit, but there's no denying that this kind of story is a solid vehicle for interesting character drama and examining Kara's past traumas and contrast to Clark Kent. And on the difference between Kara and Clark, Gillespie recently told Entertainment Weekly that they have such different upbringings. Superman hasn't gone through trauma. He came from a very loving family and was almost groomed to be in this role, whereas Supergirl has been through trauma and the role's kind of being pushed upon her at a later age, and she's having to adjust to that. Even though they're cousins, you get this almost older sibling dynamic, and that can be adversarial at times. He's the gentle guy and wants to reach out and be patient, and she's having to find a way to find herself. I also think it's worth noting that Superman calls himself Clark to Kara and not Cal. And that feels interesting, right? Like, does it highlight how Superman feels more human in contrast to Kara's isolation? I think so. I think it really shows that despite the fact that he came from this Kryptonian lineage and that he was very proud of it and was there on Earth to do the job that his parents sent him there to do, he kind of had this awakening in the last film, and he recognized that his true family was on Earth and that he is Clark Kent above all else. Yes, Kal-El is part of his lineage, but the place he identifies with most, the place that is home to him and that gives him purpose and meaning, is Earth. And he's going to be Clark Kent because that's his adopted name. That's what he most identifies with. And so while a very small moment, I think it's super important in showing where Clark is at this point in time and how he's grown since the events of Superman. I think this brief moment also says a lot about the two characters. You have Kara's hopelessness evolving into something almost entirely dictated by her love for the people around her. She exists in a harsh and cruel world, having witnessed countless deaths and tragedies in the destruction of both Krypton and Argo City. But her journey in the film is to remember that through her bond with both Krypto and later Ruthie, our love for each other makes it better. And that's what hope is, believing in our capacity to give a damn despite it all. Kara has to bear the weight of Krypton's death. She has all the survivor's guilt that Clark avoided because she watched it die twice, and then again Argo City after that. This is an interesting contrast to Clark, whose cut and dry optimism is a product of his upbringing with the Kents. So it's like he can have a more optimistic worldview because he had a bit more of a privileged upbringing. That's not to say he didn't have any obstacles to overcome, that he didn't experience intense prejudice being an alien on planet Earth. We literally saw an entire film where there was happening.
Piece of shit alien!
It doesn't make Clark's perspective wrong either, because Kara needs someone like that to balance out her nihilism. He was raised to always believe in and hope for the best, to the point of sometimes being naive, whereas Supergirl is forced to expect the worst. I think because Clark is who he is, it pushes Kara to find her own family, or at least reconsider what she thought was family, and what it means to her, and how that connection to her family is a motivating factor to do good, instead of sitting on the sidelines because you think you know what's going to happen. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you think everything is going to go wrong, then chances are everything will go wrong unless you do something to ensure that doesn't happen. There's a great line in the trailer where Superman says,
"Worried you're not going to find your people."
Which I think functions as a double metaphor for Kara's loss and grief towards Krypton, and the fact that she's never going to get these people back. She's not going to find them just drifting out there in the universe. And then also her present-day isolation and bond with Ruthie, in the way that she was able to find her people, find her community, find companionship beyond just Krypto, was by actually doing something, was actually engaging with the world. It's also a great point of comparison to how Clark found his people on Earth with the Kents, Lois, Jimmy, and all of those people. It's also worth mentioning that there seems to be a change in the duration of the story that's taking place. In the comics, Kara and Ruthie's quest to hunt Krem and save Krypto spans about several months, but here in the film, it's only 3 days. Which makes sense in the context of a film, and it shows that there's more of a sense of urgency to everything that's going on. Which calls to mind what Gunn did in a film like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, where Rocket was injured at the beginning of the story, and then we get a lot of flashbacks that kind of speak to his traumatic upbringing and everything that happened with him, and then how that brought him into the Guardians, and then their relationship with him. But there was also this ticking clock that was like, hey, we got to save our friend, and we got to do it like now. So it immediately creates stakes and creates a scenario where Kara is forced to actually do things that she's not comfortable with doing and confront things that she is not confronted before. And while, yeah, I think there's something to be said about a longer time span affording characters like this the opportunity to break down barriers and walls, there is also something about an urgent scenario that forces them to address these things that have held them back, specifically with Kara, and then learning how the way she was navigating the world can negatively impact people around her, like Ruthie. I mean, there's this great line in the trailer saying,
"Revenge. It won't take your pain away."
And that is the entirety of Kara's arc. She's learning to move beyond her self-sabotage and trauma and finding purpose in helping others and preventing them from experiencing the pain she has. But then we get to Lobo.
A man.
Which I think so many of us were just curious to see what was going to happen. I mean, we were all very excited to hear about the casting of Jason Momoa as this character. It's clearly something that he's passionate about, clearly something he has been pursuing even when he was Aquaman, and it is a casting that just makes so much sense on paper. While it's cool, and I think Momoa is clearly doing his thing, it is perfect casting, there wasn't anything in this trailer where I was like, oh my god, Lobo, this dynamic is so cool. Like, I wasn't wowed by his presence. I think he looks good, but I mean, it kind of just looks like all of the fan art that we've seen floating around for the past couple of years. So maybe there is that element of just like, I kind of already knew what this is going to look like, and oh yeah, it literally looks exactly like that, so there wasn't a surprise factor going on here, but I don't know. I'm sure it'll be great in the context of the film. I don't really know how the character fits in, because he's not in the original comic. I mean, yeah, he was in King's initial pitch to DC, but there isn't really a huge amount to say about him yet, other than
Hurting my head.
then Jason Momoa seems to be having the time of his life, and that's really cool. I could see him and Kara forming an uneasy alliance for a second act fight or heist or, you know, whatever, some sort of hijinks, which is interesting given my initial expectations were that Lobo, traditionally a bounty hunter or an anti-hero, could be a competing faction going after Krem or Ruthie or someone hired by Krem to stop Supergirl from finding him. From the looks of Lobo in this trailer and his dynamic with Supergirl, they seem to kind of already have an understanding of one another. They seem to have like encountered each other multiple times. Maybe it's just the way that that scene is playing out. There doesn't seem to be a combative relationship there, which I think is what I was perhaps expecting. I don't know. But it feels like the way that this trailer depicts Lobo within the context of the story is more of the devil on Kara's shoulders, whereas you have Clark as the angel. You know, one is too soft and the other is too hard, and Kara has to find some sort of balance between them. Lobo, someone clearly who just doesn't really give a shit. He's a bounty hunter. You know, he has baggage that he has to unpack as well, or perhaps will never unpack, and he's just kind of a violent individual. But perhaps maybe Kara carrying the spirit of Clark with her and recognizing that there is value to Clark doing what he does, funneled through her own lens, can, I don't know, impact Lobo and you know, spark some sort of change in him, because it clearly looks like they are teaming up in the finale of the film, or maybe what looks like the finale, or at least the action set piece finale. I have no idea, because the actual ending of the comic is is not very action packed. So maybe this will be the action packed thing before we get to the actual finale. Who knows? And then we've got Krem of the Yellow Hills. Well, he's definitely more interesting in the comics. And to be fair, I haven't actually seen the film, so I don't actually know if he is going to be as interesting as the comics or less so. I'm just saying from like what it looks like in the trailer, just could be any generic bad guy, and based on the test screening feedback that's kind of gotten out there, that's basically what audiences have said as well. And there's part of me that's like, oh, that's kind of cute, going back to a point in time where like the bad guys were the biggest problem in the movies. And it reminds me of like the early days of the MCU, stuff like Phase 2, even some of the stuff in Phase 1, but more so Phase 2, where it's like the bad guys, weren't the greatest. I mean, this could be fucking Malekith from Thor the Dark World, and it's mostly just someone functioning as a conduit for the journey of the protagonist. In this case, Krem functioning as a conduit for Kara and Ruthie's journey. I also have to say, the more I see of it, I don't really love Krem's redesign. I think there's something much more scary about the fact that a guy, a ginger Viking looking man, someone who's like scrawny and unassuming, is wreaking this much carnage and mayhem onto people's lives and is actually a very evil person. That to me is just more interesting than making this guy this like freaky monster who like hurts himself or whatever, who has like all of these piercings and something like that. Maybe there's something to the fact that like Krem is also a character in this version of the story where it's like, I don't know, he had something happen to him, or he doesn't believe in hope or anything, and so he just inflicts pain onto other people, maybe because of something he endured in his backstory, if they decide to give him more of a backstory in this film or something like that. And I think there is potential for that to be an interesting contrast to Kara, or at least a warning sign to Kara of like, this is who you're in danger of becoming if you continue to act and do the things that you do. So I don't know. I mean, like, I think in making him look evil with a mask or whatever, by over stylizing him, basically, you lose some of the nuance by making him seem obviously evil. I think if you had him be just like an actual person who was doing the thing that Kara was in danger of doing, or becoming the kind of person that Kara was in danger of becoming, then things become a little bit more interesting. But like by designing him the way that you did, it just becomes very obvious what you're trying to do and what you're trying to say. There's also the Krypto plot, which I think is worth mentioning. In the comic, when Kara first encounters Krem, he shoots Krypto with a poisoned arrow, seemingly killing him. This spurs Supergirl and Ruthie to hunt him, both for revenge for Ruthie's family, and so Kara can make an antidote to save the dog. In the final issue, however, it's revealed that Krypto was never going to die, and that Kara fabricated the antidote idea to convince Ruthie to go after Krem, kind of, I guess, living vicariously through this character in a very violent way. And the idea was a little polarizing, to say the least, so, maybe they'll do a bit more of a straightforward idea of Krypto actually being in danger and them needing to make the antidote. That feels more like James Gunn, and again, going back to the Guardians 3 thing, you create this sense of urgency and a need for the characters to actually go through these things in a timely manner in order to save Krypto. And while we're on the topic of Krypto, I just gotta say, I think making Krypto an integral part of Superman was a great choice, a brilliant choice. The audience has clearly fallen in love with the character and developed a bit of a bond with him through Clark's complex journey to love him. So Kara's emotions at the thought of losing him will hit a bit harder. And there's also the fact that the audience can relate to Kara having fallen in love with Krypto in the last film, thereby making her an instantly relatable character. I mean, it's the whole John Wick thing, right? Where it's like, you kill the dog, you injure the dog, and whoever did that, I mean, fuck you, man. You belong in a grave. But more than that, the reason that I really love it is that not only do you get the audience attached to something that they perhaps weren't wanting, but the way both Clark and Kara interact with Krypto reflects the kind of people, heroes they are. Clark initially doesn't care for Krypto all that much, but looks past his distaste for him and tries to help him regardless. I mean, there's the great line from Superman where he talks about the fact that
It's a dog.
Yeah, and he's not even a very good one, but he's out there alone, and he's probably scared.
Whereas Kara has an intimate bond with Krypto and isn't really willing to help Ruthie until something happens to Krypto. Supergirl's motivation is personal. She cares about the dog above all else, whereas Superman's is universal. He cares about everything, even an unruly dog he has little attachment towards.
Where's the dog?
These journeys are interesting in parallel, as they both culminate in the heroes becoming heroes in their own ways, with slightly different worldviews, but both understanding the need to save people, whether it's for themselves with Kara and Ruthie, or for others with Clark in Superman. I also think it's worth mentioning the destruction of Argo City, Krypton as a whole, Will they use Brainiac? Will they tie that into the destruction of the Kryptonian homeworld? We see a dome around the city before its destruction, and Argo was usually a floating city that jettisoned from Krypton before its collapse, but they could tie Brainiac into this, something that we saw in Superman the Animated Series. So I wouldn't be surprised if they were kind of sowing the seeds for what will eventually be Man of Tomorrow, Superman 2, in this film. Whether or not we're going to see Brainiac in this film, I think remains to be seen. I highly doubt it, but I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll see his fucking ship or something. Overall, man, I just thought this was a banger trailer. I'm really excited for Supergirl. I think there's a lot of potential here, and I think it's going to be an amazing opportunity for people to finally recognize how cool of a character Kara Zor-El is, how cool of a character Supergirl is, and, finally getting the live action treatment she's deserved for, decades, really, and using what is arguably the definitive Supergirl story in order to do so makes a lot of sense. I think similar to Superman, we're going to be getting a story that is going to endear us to this character on a deeply emotional level. It's going to tell us everything we need to know about them. And while, maybe the villain isn't the greatest, if the characters walk away stronger by the end of the film and we're like very attached to them, I think we're going to be in a great position going forward in the DCU. We'll now have other people we care about apart from Superman and want to see brought back onto the big screen in different capacities. So I'm really digging everything that I'm seeing from this film, and I can't wait to see it.